What I didn't get your take on the game, but man, what a great game earlier today. Congrats to Tech, which is hard for me to say, being a Georgia alum. But what was your take on that game?
Well, here's my take, and I don't want to be too repetitive, but I'm going to go back to my take on Wednesday or Thursday when I posted my preview. Because if I have this type of, not that I picked Georgia Tech to win, I came very close to picking the upset, but I didn't. But I grabbed the points for sure. I said, take the points. We gave the one freebie pick for everyone today, and you should have taken it, everyone. I said, take Georgia Tech and the points. But I pretty much nailed this game. And again, if I could carry this for the next 250 college football games, boy, I'm going to make a lot of people rich. Because I said, number one, DJ is playing his first game at Florida State, and the Florida State wide receiver core is completely vacated, and we've got new players. They're highly talented, highly recruited. However, not only have they not played with him, they've not played college football. They're extremely inexperienced. Not like they haven't played at all. Ja'Kai Douglas probably had the most experience coming into this game, but they might be off in game one. That was my thought. But as it turned out, I think I was correct, but I'm not going to claim being 100% correct. It was just simply DJ wasn't looking downfield most of the time. So that's point number one. And number two, just DJ as an extended point on that, just I don't have a ton of confidence in him. I don't think he's horrible. I don't want to pile on him, but do I want him quarterbacking my team? No, I just have never thought he was that good. Ever since the two games he filled in for Trevor Lawrence, those are the two best games he's ever played in his career, were the first two games he ever played against Notre Dame and Boston College. So that was point number one, was basically DJ and the wide receivers. Point number two is that Georgia Tech's offensive line, I don't think many people knew this, but again, I talked about this last week, have an excellent offensive line. And they were number one in the ACC in rushing last year. They have their 1,100-yard back, Jamal Haynes, back this season. And so I thought, well, the two best defensive line for Florida State, Braden Fisk and Jared Verse, two first-rounders, they're gone. Maybe Georgia Tech can control the ball. And there were only 14 total possessions in this game, 7 per side. And that's exactly what Georgia Tech was able to do. Now, the one point that I wasn't necessarily confident in, but I thought it had a chance of coming through, is that Georgia Tech's rush defense last year was awful. However, picked up a Penn State defensive lineman, a Miami defensive lineman, and most notably, Romello Height from USC, who's a really good player on the edge. That obviously helped. They only gave up 98 yards on the ground. And then finally, Haynes King, if he could keep the ball from harm's way, threw 16 interceptions last year. I have always liked him. He's a baller. And I guess finally, on top of that would be their field goal kicker was 17 of 19. So I said it right here on the video. That was my closing point. Got a field goal kicker in Aiden Burr, who hit 17 of 19 last year. Maybe he kicks a game winner.
Oh, wow. How about that? Well, yeah, I mean, you're spot on. And I guess the thing I don't understand, part of the problem with our sport is there's so many people out there that just have lazy takes. And obviously, it's not you. But I guess when you saw how FSU, after that fateful day in December when they didn't make the playoff, which I thought they deserved to get in. I thought it was ridiculous that they didn't get in. But when you saw that team, when you saw all the people leave the team and not want to play in the Orange Bowl, and just this just amazing turnover that they had, when you have that, I don't understand why everybody was just anointing them as a top 10 team. I mean, they had so much turnover from last year. And not only that, the coaches never really, when you see a team, and again, I guess I'm just so used to Kirby Smart and the culture that he's developed at Georgia, but when you see a team like that just not want to play in their bowl game, to me that says something about the culture of that program. And and the way they just didn't show up and got beat so bad. And I mean, and we had a bunch of first and second rounders that decided to play in that game. So I think it says a lot about our culture. But the fact that all those kids just didn't want to play in the bowl game, they left the program. I just don't think they have a great culture at FSU, and he's not been able to develop that. And so when I saw that, plus I saw that Tech was such a, the latter part of last year, Tech was a hard out last year. I mean, they were tough to beat towards the end of last year. I mean, they had when we played them, they were, when I say was not we, when Georgia played them. I hate when people say we, their team.
You
But
do? We'll have to discuss that sometime, Porter.
yeah, I'm not out there playing. I'm just an alum of
I
the.
understand, but if you don't exist, they don't exist.
Yeah, I know. I just don't like.
They
I
don't exist. If you don't exist, they don't exist.
I know. I don't like saying we. I just because I'm not
Okay.
out. Anyway, when Georgia played them, I mean, granted, we made a dumb mistake. They were up by 16 going into the fourth quarter, and probably one of the worst decisions that Carson Beck made last year is he tried to force one in the end zone. He could have easily just sat on the ball and kicked a field goal. We would have been up by 19, and then it would have been over. But anyway, we allowed them back in the game and all that. So anyway, they played Georgia pretty tough last year, and they played obviously they beat North Carolina last year late. They beat Miami late in the year. They I don't know, they were just a tough out last year, and they kept getting better and better and better, and had a really good bowl game. So I don't really understand these people that just were like, well, Florida State's going to just smoke them. I'm thinking, what are you looking at? And I don't know. I think that's part of the problem with our sport, just how lazy people are when it comes to some of their takes. It's just anointing a program like Florida State that had one really good year and just say that they the next year would be just as good, or slightly less as good than they were this past year. I don't know. I don't understand it, especially when they had so much turnover. So
Yeah,
uh,
as I considered Georgia Tech's run down the stretch, they had two games in which they were a double-digit underdog. That's another point that I made in this video. There were 18 double-digit underdog wins, and shoot, we could have another one tonight. That would be two already before we make it to week one. And there were 18 involving power conference teams, and Georgia Tech pulled off two of them. One against Miami as a 3-touchdown dog, and one against North Carolina as an 11-point dog. They won 4 of their final 6. They beat North Carolina. They beat Virginia, who's not a good team, but they beat them by 4 touchdowns. They had a down game against Clemson, although I'm not going to say it was competitive. They lost by 3 touchdowns, but I watched quite a bit of that game, and they were in it for a while. They beat Syracuse, played the respectable game against Georgia, were down by 2 touchdowns in the bowl game, and came back and beat UCF. I do think that one of the big issues in our sport and trying to predict from season to season is just, even before the transfer portal, was that these teams are more different than, let's say, professional teams from year to year. And now we got the transfer portal. So just trying to gauge these teams from year to year is kind of difficult. And yeah, most people are lazy and they're going to default to the Florida State brand.
well, I mean, is it really that great of a brand? I mean, I know they were really good in the '90s. They had some, they kind of fell off in the early to mid 2000s when Ricks and Bobby Bowden, kind of his latter part of his tenure there. I mean, they're getting blown out by Wake Forest by like 38 at home. I mean, in the mid to late 2000s, and then they have a couple really good seasons under Jimbo, but Florida State is not. I mean, they are. I know when they were shopping for a conference, as an alum of an SEC school, I didn't want them in the SEC. I mean, they don't bring anything. They're a very good program. They got a good tradition and history, but so does 8 or 9 of the current SEC. I don't know really what they bring, and then And then when you see FSU treat their administration or the ACC administration the way they have, when you see the way they, did all these investigations, and I mean, it just, it's one of those things. It's like, why would you want that in your conference? I mean, it's like a guy who, um, is suddenly out on the dating market, and suddenly a wife is, or a woman is cheating on her husband, and then suddenly is interested in you. It's like, why would you want that? Why would you want to be interested in somebody that treats their current situation the way they treated the ACC? I mean, they did it such a classless way. I sure as heck didn't want them in the SEC. If they want to go to the Big Ten, that's fine. But now they've lost this game. They've gotten beat, last two games by teams from Georgia, and I think they think more highly of themselves than they really are.
You might be right on that. I will say this on the personal note in regards to, and we'll just stay on that very briefly. People think that, men in particular, because they always think that they're different, that they are going to be different, that is genuine. So we'll move that to the side. But taking your analogy to the football field, well, the reason Florida State would not treat the SEC and the Big Ten like that is because they would be overjoyed and just thankful and be thanking their lucky stars that they could play in a league like that. I'm not saying that their ethics would be any different. You make a good point. And actually, the point that you are making, and I don't necessarily agree with you, not because I disagree with you, but because I just don't know. But I will just say that there are two sides to this. And the one that you're stating was actually backed up in this latest Brett McMurphy article, in which apparently McMurphy, and we've got to trust him that his sources are, he's stating exactly what he discovered. And that's in speaking to more than one, it sounded like 3 or 4 presidents from the SEC and the Big Ten, that they stated just what you said. Why would we want to take in a partner that is treating its current league this way? Why would we want to deal with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's true about it. It's true. You can make so many analogies in life. It's the same thing, if you're working for somebody and you're treating your boss terribly. It's the same kind of thing. People don't realize that there are consequences to the way they treat people in every walk of life, whether it's romantic relationships, professional relationships, whatever. You cannot treat people like that and expect that not to come back and haunt you. So, you know, that was my whole thing with FSU. Is just this kind of arrogance that they had when they really didn't have the. Granted, they had a wonderful history in the '90s. They were such an impressive program in the '90s. Believe me, I lived through it. Unfortunately, I had to live in Southwest Georgia when I had to deal with a lot of Florida State fans down that way. That they were just bandwagon Georgians that just had to root for a team that was good and all this other stuff. So I don't. I will say this from a personal standpoint. I don't like FSU mainly because I had to live in Southwest Georgia in the '90s. I live like 40 minutes from Tallahassee, and we had so many bandwagon fans that I had to deal with that had no loyalty to their state. So anyway, now that it's not that way anymore, I'm loving it. So I do not like Florida State, but I also do not like Florida State by the way they have acted in the courtroom and everywhere else. So it was
Yes.
hard for me to watch that game today because I don't like Georgia Tech, obviously, but I have a lot of animus towards Florida State too. So I guess I should go ahead and.
Well, so to be fair, on the Florida State side, and hopefully we will, through discovery, find out a lot of this, that their claim is not just that the ACC was incompetent. It's one thing to be incompetent, but they claim that they were actually corrupt in colluding with ESPN, and that whole situation was bungled from the start in regards to uh, the not just see on the surface, obviously, the claim against Florida State is you had free right to sign the grant of rights and then actually re-sign it just about 5 or 6 years ago. So you've had two opportunities to deny playing under this contract that you're now trying to get under, however, or out of. But the flip side of that is that they are claiming Florida State some unscrupulous activity from the ACC and ESPN that hopefully we will find out.
Yeah. Well, it's it's a tough situation. For people that are genuinely good FSU people, I hate that they're going through this, but it's anyway. I just I don't want to get bogged down in just discussing that. But I guess I'll leave you with this. I'm not gonna. I mean, on this subject, I'll leave you with this one, and it's what I tell FSU fans all the time: is you've won 3 national championships in your history, and every single national championship that you won was as a member of the ACC. So tell me how the ACC has been so bad for you. And they always go, well, and they start getting into the money and the future and all this other stuff. The fact is, they never won a national championship before they were a member of the ACC, and yet yet, like,
but they only have had the program that they've had since roughly 1980. So they only played as a nationally prominent program for about 12 years before they joined the ACC.
Yep. That's about right. Yeah, I think the 78 Orange Bowl was really their first time they really did something. They got beat by the Sooners pretty badly.
Yeah, 79 and 80 teams went to the Orange Bowl against Oklahoma.
Yeah.